Hi, my name's Tim, and I have a problem. My shed is accumulating stuff, which is exactly what it's there for, but all the space to put stuff is on the ground level. And there's only so high you can stack things. You can see some of the things starting to teeter and tip over behind me. I need shelves. I need to be able to put some of these smaller things or odds and ends things like hoses or extension cords or car jacks. Things that don't really have a place. I need to give them a place. And that's what this is all about. I'm going to be building a set of shelves right over here. And the first thing I'm going to be doing is measuring. Lots and lots of measuring off camera, because honestly, it's it's kind of boring. So I made sure that I had on paper a good representation of what is actually here in the shed. And what that looked like for me is this little notebook. I sketched out a front and a back and a side view of both the left and right. Eventually I will be putting shelves on both sides of the shed. But for now I'm just going to start off with a simple one along the right side. And so it's going to be about 6 feet long and a couple feet wide. This blue area here is going to be the shelf. It's going to have plywood on top. But right here you can see basic idea of what's going to happen. So this is what this is going to look like when finished. This is what it looks like right now. Now that I've got everything measured, I know the wood that I need. The only thing that I'm not entirely sure on is the suspension. Now I have just kind of these lines with a little dot here at the end to represent suspending from these rafters, but I don't know what that looks like yet. So when I get to Lowe's and get the wood, I'm also going to be taking a close look at the hardware section and finding out what's there, what I need to hang this. I did kind of rough out a sketch of what it will eventually look like. So it's going to be a 2x2 with a 1/4 inch plywood on top for a total of 2 inches, because 2x2s are actually 1.5 inch. Yeah, the eye bolt with a washer and a nut down here is going to be right there, I'm pretty sure. But then, and I think up top as well. But anything in between that, whether it's tensioners or how to loop the cable or crimp it off, or some of the mechanics of how the cabling works. This is my first time doing a DIY, so I'm gonna have to get some expertise from the folks there at Lowe's. And so first thing we gotta do, now that we have all the measurements, is go get the hardware. Gotta make sure I got my measurements on me. We'll head on in here and hopefully find someone that can help us out. I need at least 2 inches, and then a 5/16 inch is the largest drill bit I've got. It looks like it's gonna fit my designs with some clearance. Turns out they measure eye bolts by the entire length, threading and bolt. So I had to search around for something that gave me at least 2 1/4 inches clearance. Now I need some way to connect these to the cable that I'm going to be getting, and I think that's going to be something like these. I'm not entirely sure. It could be something like these. Now the reason why I'm going with cable instead of something like chain is because I want the ability to adjust each connection point and make it shorter as needed. So I think I'm going to go with something like this here to be able to make those fine tunes later on. And I'm actually going to use the much bigger one that has a 215 pound working load. I just want to cover all my bases, make sure I'm not building something that's not going to take the load. Of course, that's all dependent on the strength of the lumber, but I figure where I can actually manage the working load, I should do so. With the help of the amazing staff here at Lowe's, I was able to get all the hardware together that I needed. I got cable, I got the vinyl coated kind, and then I wanted to mount it through the shelf using an eye bolt, and then to connect it to the eye, from the eye bolt upwards, I went ahead with this carabiner. It says it's got a working load of 660 pounds, which is going to be far beyond what I need, and it looks hefty enough. I think I should be just fine. And then from there to a tensioner. What I like about this particular kind of tensioner, instead of the kind that just has the hook on top, is that there's no chance of, bumping the shelf upwards and then losing that connection and it dropping. And then to make the cable into nice neat loops, I got these with this to clamp it off and make it all nice and secure. So that should be everything I need for the metal hardware for suspending. Let's look into wood for the actual shelf. All right, so while I'm waiting on somebody to come back and help me out with this the saw here, let's go ahead and take stock of what we've got. I've got this 1/4-inch plywood that I will have cut down to fit on top of the shelf, and I will notch out the corner where the stud will fit with my handsaw at home. I've also got these 3 lengths of 2x2. These will be cut down for the front stud, the back stud, as well as the 3 cross studs and the wall stud that will fill the gap that exists on the back wall. All right, so finally made it out of Lowe's. It was a little bit more expensive than I was hoping. I think that should be all we need. Time to head on home and hopefully start putting it together. I'm sure time will tell that I'm a little bit over-engineered on this shelf. The guy that cut the wood down for me there in the back, his name is Ben. He asked what I was making. I said, a shelf for my shed. And he said, you know they sell those, right?
3 months later.
So I started this project on the first warm day of the year, and then it got really cold again, started snowing again, and it was a few months really before the weather and really life allowed me to get back outside and start back up again on this project. But now things are nice and warm, and we can start installing our shelf. All right, so it's gotten emptied out, and now it's time to actually start putting things together. But first, I'm gonna need a bit of a surface to work on. Not only work on, but also to hold it up in place before I'm able to suspend it from the ceiling. All right, so the measurement here from the corner to the edge of the shelf is 72 3/4 inch, and that will fit nicely here on this stud all the way over here to that stud over there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to notch out the plywood so that it will fit around that stud there. And for that, I'm going to go grab my Sawzall. While I was inside looking for the Sawzall, I actually remembered that I also got another tool from my dad, and that is this oscillating multi-tool, and it has this saw blade. To be honest, I'm not sure if the saw blade is rated more for metal or for wood, but we're gonna go ahead and give this a shot. So that worked out okay. I think in hindsight, maybe I would have used the Sawzall instead. There was just a little bit of a limiting factor there with the center of the bit here getting in the way of the cut. I think a Sawzall would have been a little bit more versatile in this case, but anyways, the cut's done with just a little bit of room to spare, and on to the next part. So I debated for a while how to actually assemble this thing, and because there's so many things that depend on other things. There's just some things that need to happen in the right order. So I'm going to build the frame of the shelf first. I'm going to mount these cross braces basically on the wrong side, and then I'll flip it over into the right position. Then attach that to the walls, put the plywood on top of that, then run the suspension from above. And I got these screws because they are self-boring, they don't need any pre-drilling, and they've also got a flat head on them so they can countersink real nice into the wood, which is great for mounting it back here into the existing studs of the shed. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, for today's lesson we are going to learn pre-drill, even if the package says no need to pre-drill. So what I think I might do for this is I'm going to back that out, make sure that there is a notch for it, and then push it back in flush. And then what I'll do is when I am mounting the plywood topper onto it, I will drill close enough to this that it will pull this together and keep it secure. It is going to be in the back corner. Hopefully that means it will have a little bit less stress on it. So looks like we're going to be pre-drilling. So now that I've got the back side lengthwise stud mounted to all of the width studs, I'm going to flip it over and then mount the front side lengthwise stud to those, and then I will be able to mount that to the shed. The understructure of the shelf is assembled. Now it's time to mount it to the existing stud work of the shed, and that's going to be right in here underneath this edged plywood here, so that when I pull this out and mount it to the top of the shelf, it will come up flush with the plywood up top here. Now, one thing that's going to be a bit interesting is this right here. I built this to only come out this far and fit right in that gap there, so I'm going to have to mount it to the 2x6 back there and then also this back wall. We'll see how that goes. Yeah, I'm not sure just yet how I'm going to mount this. What I might end up doing is using a bit of the leftover scrap and mounting some underneath. I'm not sure yet how I'm going to mount this here. Probably should have figured that out a while back. Now, before we get going too much further in this project, I think, overestimate just how thick the walls of this shed were. So we're gonna have to get rid of these screws sticking out here. It's not good for when you have kids running around. So to get rid of this, I'm gonna go ahead and use my rotary tool and the grinding blade here, and let's get going. So I got rid of those big boxes, and I'm just using the Christmas tree box just kind of propped up underneath it. It's holding into the side wall stud pretty well. It droops a little bit, which is why I have that up underneath there. It's time to mount this front edge of the shelf to the back wall stud. And here I was able to drill right into the back wall. But here is a little less clear of how I'm going to end up doing that. So one of my original ideas for connecting each of these studs was to use a metal bracket like this. They only cost like $1 each, I think. So I scrapped that idea, but I still have these. I think what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to repurpose one of these brackets. I'm going to bend it out straight, and then I'm going to put it up underneath here and just mount it straight up to the bottom side like that. I think that'll provide a pretty solid mount to this back stud. Now I've got a line marked up here, up on top, that should indicate level, but I've also got this handy dandy level here that I'm not sure is actually sitting quite right. So I think I'm going to abandon that and just trust that my line is accurate. So I just figured something out. These holes, if I were to do it like this, these holes would come dangerously close to the edge of this piece of wood here, and there is no hole in the center, but there is a hole in the center up here. So if I rotate this around, I should be able to mount to the top through the center hole and keep from splitting near the edges. The next step is going to bring the plywood in, lay it down on top, and get it secured to the top. And then I should be able to figure out where to drill holes for suspension. Oh, would you look at that? Oh, it's a thing of beauty. Yeah. Now the shed's not built perfectly square, or maybe the plywood's not perfectly square. I don't know. So things don't quite match up over here, but that's okay. It's just back in the back. Now we gotta set some screws around the perimeter and on the studs. But first, as we learned earlier, we're pre-drilling. What I could do is I could bend another one of these out and use this center hole as kind of a jig for where to drill, at least along the edge. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a shelf. That's a shelf. Oh man. It's not perfect. That didn't quite pull together like I wanted it to back there in the corner. But yeah, All those gaps are closed up there. It's nice and tight. You know, this piece of plywood wasn't the most perfect piece of wood. It's a little long on this end, a little short on that end. As a matter of fact, that caused a little bit of a chip out here with this screw. But, you know, nothing terrible. Maybe put a little bead of wood glue down in there. And, yeah, it's really coming together.
Many weeks later.
So the first pause in this project was from weather and life just kind of getting in the way until weather started to warm back up enough that I could come out and resume the project. This last gap, however, was due to something a little bit different. My wife and I both came down with COVID-19 and recovered for the most part a week and a half or so ago, and slowly been improving over time. Normally I'd just say we got sick, we're better, let's get going with the project. But this one's a little bit different because about 7 months ago I lost my dad to COVID-19. He and my mom raised 7 of us kids. He was a teacher, he was a historian, he was an actor. He is really the big inspiration behind this project. My dad was a handyman. He liked tinkering and fixing and improving the things around him. He loved his family. He loved Jesus. And it's because of that that I know where he is today and that I will see him again. But in the meantime, he's definitely the inspiration behind my wanting to be able to improve this space and get this shelf up so that I can store things a little bit better here in this shed. So let's get back to it. First thing I'm going to do is measure into the middle of the 2x2 of the front of the shelf so that I can drill my holes for my eye bolts. Alright, now that we've got a line that marks the center of this 2x2, we'll use a plumb bob from the rafters to find out exactly where on these 2x4s it's directly above this line. Alright, so I hold the string up here on the rafter. If you look down here, you'll notice that it's pointing at a spot on the wood. And all I need to do is move this string until that point is right on that line. Then I mark the string, and that tells me what spot is directly above that line. With a few marks from the string, I can find a line that is plumb or vertical. And then I can measure halfway down, and right there is where my eye bolt for the top of the suspension will go. Alright, I know where my eye bolt is going on each of the 3 rafters, and I know what points are plumb or directly vertical from where I'm going to be putting the eye bolts. Now, because this is just directly underneath the edge of the rafter, I'm going to need to take another measurement once the eye bolt is in, of how far out the bottom of the eye bolt comes, and then measure that same distance from here, and that's where I'll drill for the bottom eye bolts. Now, because I want things to go as smoothly as possible with this drilling, I'm going to start off with a rather small bit and then work my way up to the largest bit that I've got, which is roughly the diameter of the eye bolt. Everything worked out pretty well using this method, except the threads on the bolt are a little bit wider than my largest drill bit, so I had to try to widen the hole with that last drill bit. Everything worked out pretty well, drilling the holes out in increments like that, but the threads are still just a little bit too big for what I was able to drill out. So I'm having to manually screw this through. It's tough going. Alright, so here's where we are. I've got the eye bolts up in the rafters. Now what I can do is I can measure from the wood to the lowest part of the eye bolt, and that appears to be about an inch, maybe a hair under. And then I can take that measurement down to where that plumb bob met this line, measure this way about an inch, a hair under,
then I will know exactly where my lower eye bolts need to go for all 3 studs. And now that we've got the locations identified for the lower eye bolts, we can go ahead and start drilling those out incrementally just like we did up above. We are in the home stretch now with eye bolts both above and below. And now it is time to figure out how to assemble everything to go from above to below. I think I'm going to lay it out kind of loosely here on the shelf, figure out how everything goes together, and then work on making it more permanent. Well, I have a new problem. My goal has been to attach the cable down here to this eye bolt and attach the cable to the bottom of this tensioner and then loop the top of the tensioner into a carabiner that would then latch onto the eye bolt here up in the rafters. Well, I've just discovered that this has an opening that is far too small for both the tensioner and the eye bolt. So I'm going to need to go to the local hardware store and get something a little bigger than this. Here's how this is going to work. I loop the cable around like so, and then I have this clamp that goes on underneath and then gets bolted in place. And just like that, everything's assembled. It's going to need a little bit of work on these tensioners to get everything nice and as level as possible. The shed itself is not level, but I can get everything to have the proper amount of tension distributed over these 3 cables. But once that's done, this shelf is ready for all the junk. There it is. It's not the prettiest shelf in the world, and like I said earlier, it might be a little bit over-engineered, but it's definitely already improving things in here. I mean, look at it. It's taking a whole bunch of stuff off of the pile back there, a whole bunch of stuff off of the floor over here. I like it. I like it a lot. Now, the idea is I might be able to put a shelf on this side. The difference would be that this one would be almost the entire length of the left side here, but would also kind of form an L on the back going across 2 studs instead of just the 1. But yeah, that's a story for another day. I may do that, I may not. This shelf is doing a great amount of work already, so I may not need this other shelf. I don't know yet. Well guys, thank you so much for joining me on this little adventure, trying to figure out how to build a shelf for the first time, a little first-time DIY project for me. If you have any recommendations for how to simplify the suspension of this shelf, or if there is a shelf unit that they sell that does exactly what I'm doing right here, comment below. Let me know if I missed something. I would love to hear from you. Also, let me know if this second shelf that I was talking about might be something that you'd be interested in seeing me put together as well. Of course, if it's a pre-built solution, it might not be as interesting to watch me assemble that. But if it's something that I can piece together like I did with this shelf, then that might be something that I'd be interested in filming again. I think that was kind of fun, don't you? Yeah, let me know down below if that's something that you want to see. Of course, subscribe if that's something that you want to see and that's what we decide to do. And also, you know, share and like and thumbs up and ring the bell and all that stuff. So anyways, it was fun hanging out with you guys in here for a while. I'll see you next time.